All right, it looks like I'm live. Great. Uh, Welcome back. This is Austin Startup Week. Again, let me go ahead and reintroduce myself. My name is Tony. I am the head of community for Sana Benefits, and I just want to say thank you to Friday Health Plans for sponsoring this amazing track, which is uh, mental health and wellness. Right now, we're going to talk about navigating emotional risk in an online environment. But I also want to let you guys know that flu season is right now. It's happening. Make sure you guys get your flu shot. Something that I'm very passionate about is go get your flu shot. Anyways, I want to go ahead and introduce Anna Westbrook, Jonas Rockman, Andrew Shear, and Natalie Koo. And they'll be doing this amazing presentation. I'm very excited. Hey guys, how's it going?
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Nice to see you. So my name's Anna, and I am going to introduce you all to Andrew, Natalie, and Junice in about 15 minutes after giving a short presentation. You get this sneak preview of them. Let's all wave. Hello, Andrew, Natalie, waving. And they can actually go back out now, and we're going to do a presentation, and then we're going to get into our panel discussion. How did your networking go, Tony?
You know, it went pretty great. I actually got to meet Joe Hudson. He is the director of operations for Tony and Guy. He is based in Dallas. He was just explaining to me that this is his first time in Austin Startup Week, so it was pretty nice. How was yours?
So I was doing prep with my team, but I'm excited to do some networking after. I have plenty of time the rest of the day. So if you like the presentation and you want to meet with me, please go ahead and click that magic button that lets you meet with me.
And I want to tell you, everyone, please take pictures and hashtag us. Hashtag us ASW2020, hashtag ASW2020 or Austin Startup Week. Make sure you guys share those pictures. So we want to see what you guys are doing. How are you watching our presentations? Are you guys on your pajamas, having a nice coffee? Show us those pictures. And, I'm pretty sure we all want to see how everyone is enjoying Austin Startup Week.
I appreciate the way everyone has pivoted this online. Thanks, Tony. Hey, everybody. So I have a screen that I'm sharing, and it looks like you can see it now. So I'll pop over there. My name is Anna, and we're going to start with a little game while we let people get logged into the online environment. And we are going to be playing a game. It's going to be a version of Never Have I Ever, but we'll just call it Oh Yes, I Have. And I'm monitoring the comments here on my phone, so I'd love for you to tell me if you have done any of these Zoom hookups or hiccups or online hiccups. I'd love to know. These are some of my fun little silly mistakes that I'm slightly embarrassed about, but not totally embarrassed about. So I have actually accidentally messaged a person individually on Zoom when I thought I was messaging the whole group. If you've done that, go ahead and give me an oh yes in the chat. I have said goodbye at least 4 times at the end of the Zoom call. I tend to do longer goodbyes. And what you can do also, instead of saying, oh yes, you can just put the number if there's a certain one of these that you've done before. I have eaten soup or other really loud food during a meeting and without turning off my microphone. And we've got Autumn saying, oh yes. And that has just, it takes over the Zoom call. Megan says, oh yes. We've had a family member walk by in the middle of the meeting. I love that that is okay now. We have all had to accept that we have personal lives. I've muted myself and turned off my video just because I didn't want to get ready for the day. And then that one, we can get into a whole bunch of gender dynamics and expectations of those who identify as women, but we won't for now. We'll just say we have done that. Sent 3 separate emails with info that could have been in one email. I tend to do that. It can be overly communicative. Or sent a long-winded email that I perceived to be full of helpful details, but really was just stressful. We've got Kelly says 3, 5, and 8. This can be like an Enneagram thing, but for just things we do online that we're embarrassed of. Waited an unacceptably long time to respond to an email, finally responded, felt relief, and then immediately got a response back from them. This one always gets me, and I've got some new friends who are retirees, and they are very quick with their email responses. And okay, Katie Klein here, who says yeah, oh yes, and drinking something on calls. I love it. And also remembered an important communication deadline at 2 a.m. and then written an email about it, but scheduled it for 7:30 the next morning. I'm the queen of that. If you ever get an email from me before 10 in the morning, it was scheduled from the night before. I am sneaky. Oh, we've got an oh yes from Autumn for it looks like all of these. Okay, well, thank you so much for playing that game with me, guys. We're going to go on here now. Welcome to Navigating Emotional Risk in an Online Environment. What you can expect is a quick introduction, which we are almost done with. And then I'm going to give you a presentation on my tips and tricks for navigating emotional risk online. And then we're going to have a panel discussion with some really great local and international professionals. So nice to meet you. My name is Anna. I'm a composer and a playwright, and I'm a lifelong educator. And I run a program called Isabel and the Runaway Train. We teach people to support survivors of sexual maltreatment using musical theater and professional development. When I say sexual maltreatment, I mean everything in your mind between harassment and slavery. So all of those scary words we talk about in our programs, how to support people. Our main training program is called Get Isabel Certified. To be Isabel Certified means that if Isabel were a real survivor instead of an imaginary survivor, that we would feel comfortable letting you talk to her. So it means feeling comfortable talking about me too. I created this as a live training after successfully launching our live theater production. And I was told pretty early on that I should make an online version. And I told people that I'll make an online something else, but I won't do an online version of this. I don't want to. And then COVID happened. So we couldn't do any live events. So now it made more sense to pivot an existing program and put it online than it did to try to launch an entirely new program. So I sat down with myself and said, why don't you want to do this online? And it was because I'm so intentional about navigating emotional risk, and I love using a live environment for that. So I thought, I can't do that through a screen. So what I decided to do is challenge that and write down the reasons why it was difficult and make an adapted program. So that's what we're going to go through today, is we're going to talk about what I learned from that process and how I navigate risk in my programs. And then we're going to expand. We're going to talk with Junice Rockman, aka J-Rock, and she is a local neuropsychotherapist and journalist and all sorts of things. And she's going to talk about what it's like for her to be navigating therapy situations online. And then Natalie Koo, who is the director of Avian Communications, and she has been operating businesses in 3 different time zones and is so great at taking care of people while considering long distance situations, which some of you may be doing as well. And then we're going to talk to Andrew Shearer, who is the founder of Brave Path, and that's an HR company that primarily works within the tech industry. He's going to talk about recruitment and first impressions. So we've done your introduction. Congratulations. I love it. I'm seeing in the chat that Katie does the pre-scheduling as well. I love that. So on to my presentation. My tips and tricks. Just so you know, these tips and tricks are meant to be from a captain to a captain, meaning somebody who leads meetings, leads the teams. And I would love you to know that if you're leading a team, this is for you. But also if you are not leading teams, then there are actually lots of things that you can get for this. What I hope from you is that you can name the feeling you might feel if you're ever in a meeting and think like, that didn't go very well, I didn't like it. I'd like you to be able to name that feeling and provide some better feedback. And yes, Lindsay's recommending people that they send questions in the chat. That'd be great. So tips and tricks for navigating emotional risk. We're going to define your terms, own your wins, and recognize your power. Just 3 tips, and I'll get more into what those mean. When I say define your terms, I mean both your vocabulary and your expectations. So here's some things that I might mean by expectations. And I want to say that Natalie is really great at defining expectations. And if you go to her LinkedIn or Medium page, she has these really great tips and tricks. Like she advocates for 45-minute meetings, which I think is life-changing. She says you can have a nice cup of tea after, you have time to do that follow-up thing. I love it. I've never done any hour meetings since then. It's great. So thanks for that, Natalie. So as I said, we're going to define our terms. The terms we're using today, this presentation will be very meta. I'm going to do the thing as I tell you about the thing. We're going to define online environment, navigate, and emotional risk. So what does an online environment mean? Well, what are you expecting? Go ahead and put it into the chat. When I say online environment, what are you thinking about? I'll give you a second to do that. All right. So here are some things that I was guessing. We're going to see if when the chats come through, they're about. I was going to guess meetings via video platforms. That means really this kind of meeting that's public or a private meeting, presentation style, collab style. Emails, emails, emails. I said it 3 times because I feel very overwhelmed by emails. Oh, we've got Natalie saying Zoom rooms and emails. Yes, phone calls or audio only calls. I consider those online environment because they're also often linked to other things we're doing online. Autumn says online distractions, Slack, anything not in person. Very cool. So I put texting here. So what are we going to focus on in this presentation? We're talking more about video meetings, but we can get into emails and phone calls and Slack. Slack is what I know the least about. So just if you really want to talk about distractions on Slack or best ways to use phone calls, then I'd love for you to speak up in the chat room at the end of this or throughout with your questions so that I can ask our panelists these questions for you. So I'd say an online environment is any interaction in which technology connects us instead of physical space. So that's that term. On to the next one, navigate. This is what navigate means. From the dictionary, plan and direct the route or course of a ship, aircraft, or other form of transportation, especially using instruments or maps. So it's fairly complicated. And when we think about navigate, we think about ships, which is actually sad for me. I run a train-themed program, and whenever I do online events, we usually pretend to be on a train. But I realized for this that being on a train implies there's a clear track, which I don't really think we're talking about right now. I think that when we're navigating emotional risk online, it is more like we're riding the waves of all this new technology, and it can feel really overwhelming sometimes. So we're going to use the ship analogy. I define navigate as having a clear destination with a flexible journey. I think it's something that's active, ongoing, and changeable, and something that has both prep work and real-time execution. What does emotional risk mean? The best way to get into this is to evaluate a question and the multiple ways that we answer the question that are true. How are you? If I ask you how you are and you say, I'm fine, that is probably not untrue, but it is a low risk version of truth. So if you ask me how I'm doing and I say, I'm sad, well, that's more specific. It's a little more risky. And if you ask me how I'm doing and I say, I've recently, and say something even more specific, maybe something troubling I'm going through, well, then I'm taking a little bit more of a risk. So these levels of truth come with a level of risk, and they require a level of trust. So I say emotional risk is any level of truth telling. And keep in mind, it comes with a level of risk, requires a level of trust. So I'd like to take a minute to know who are some of your high-level truth people. And by that, I mean people that you will, when they ask you how you doing, you answer honestly, somewhere in a higher risk period. So you can either comment in the chat with their role or their name. I'll go first. My high-level truth person is my partner, my husband. His name is Daniel. I also consider my parents to be high-level truth people. And I'd love to know who you have that high level of trust with in your life. If you throw that into the chat, I can see where we're at. What often happens, and we'll see if that happens today, is that our high level truth people tend to be from our personal life. And I think that is great. And the distinction between personal and professional can be really important to keep. But I also think it's really nice to be able to answer this question honestly when you're at work, and it can feel like a breath of fresh air. Natalie's saying her best friend, who's also Natalie. That is awesome that you have the double Natalie experience. All right, so we're gonna play a game to make sure. Oh, Jacqueline says husband and sister. Autumn says mom. Yep, so we've got some great family dynamics and chosen family. Very cool. So we're gonna evaluate the risk of this question. So I'm not asking you to answer the next question. I'm asking you to go ahead and tell me what level of risk you think it is. So do you like dogs? What do we think? Is this a high risk, low risk, medium risk? Go ahead and tell me in the chat. I think it's something that comes up pretty often, especially in Austin. Natalie says medium. Awesome. So for me, I actually see this as a medium to high risk question, even though I think a lot of people see it as low risk, because I don't really like dogs. And I tell you that because I trust you all so much. But I've learned that when somebody asks, do you like dogs? And I say no, they hear, you kick puppies. Like it just goes real dark right away. So what I've learned to say when people ask, do you like dogs, is I love to follow dogs on Instagram. And then I just keep it there for a while. And then I pivot to, oh, I'm allergic to dogs. And then I never really directly say, I don't like dogs. And that's how I moderate the risk of that question. So let's see if this question gets more or less risky as we change it. Do you like dogs or cats? What do you think? Does this increase the risk or lower the risk? Or birds, really just increasing it into options. Natalie says lower. I agree. I think, because even I can say I like cats better than dogs, and we don't have to get into me not really wanting to be around any of those things. I have a fish. And then one more question. Will you watch my dog this weekend? Is this a higher risk or a lower risk? Thank you, Kelly, for answering the other question. What do we think? So for me, this goes higher. I want to see if you guys think this is a higher risk thing. Yeah, it's more specific. Okay. So that is my first, Natalie's like, yes, higher. That is my first tip and trick, is to really define your terms. Both, we talked a little bit about our expectations in the introduction, and we've now defined the terms in our own presentation. Autumn, such a commitment. Yes, absolutely. So I want you to own your wins. So whenever you have a meeting or any sort of online engagement, it's important that you have a project management or relationship development goal, and it should be clear-ish. I don't think you have to be super clear. One of the ways you can get to the right amount of clear is by deciding where you're not going. Andrew Shearer is really great at this. I recently had a meeting with him where he was very clear that, hey, we're going to talk about possibly doing an event, but we are not planning the whole event. We're just talking about the options. And that made it really easy to know what our win was. Also, I think it's important for you to celebrate your win when you get there. So Andrew, I'd like to celebrate right now. Yay, we're doing an event together, and hopefully we can do some others together in the future. Now, I would love for you to make sure in your org that you make celebration a low risk activity, because if it is not easy to say, yay, I accomplished my work today, then it makes it harder to say how you're doing or if there are problems. So it's a really great way to help moderate the risk and set a risk level in your environment. So I want you to think about, how do you want people to answer this question in the workplace? Do you want them to be able to say that they're fine, but they're stressed because of recently, and then maybe some negative thing can be shared? I think that's really appropriate to have like a medium level or even high level risk in the workplace. And it's not always negative. Sometimes it's letting people be able to say, I'm really excited, I just got a cool opportunity, or just very deep and thoughtful answers like, I'm grateful, which Junice constantly says things like this when I ask her how she is. And I love getting to have friends with neuropsychotherapists, because you get great examples of answers like that. So why do emotions feel risky? Why do we even need to be evaluating this? Because of power dynamics. And that brings me to our last check mark, which is to recognize power. Power is the ability to do something or act in a particular way, or to direct or influence the behavior of others. And whenever you're a captain, whenever you're leading a relationship, my husband likes puns and you really wanted me to say that, so there you go. I'd love for you to take a power inventory. And these are some questions you can ask yourself. Who am I? Where am I going? How am I getting there? And who's on board with me? And what's in the water? I asked myself these questions before I planned this presentation, and this is what I came up with. And I'm not asking you all to share your power inventories or to do this exercise right now. I'm just giving you an example. And it feels a little bit less risky for me to do that because I have the microphone, I'm in charge, and I already knew we were going to do this. So taking a power inventory means listing all of these things about yourself. The things that I put as yellow are things that I perceive as giving me power in society. And the things that are gray are things that I think also reduce some of my power. So it's important for me to think about who's on board with me and know that not everybody has the same background as me. Not everybody has the same access to power as me. So if I say something is low risk as a white person, it is possible that a person of color may feel that it's a higher risk, and I just don't know because I don't have that shared experience. And similarly, I could think something is very high risk, and maybe someone who is a male would feel like it's a low risk thing. And having the verbiage of talking about what levels of risk things are can open up really great conversations about equity. So moving on, we're going to talk about how you can manage the power to build trust and lower risk in your environment. So these are some tasks that I'd love for you to give yourself whenever you are evaluating power and lowering risk. And I'm going to do a little case study. It takes you through each of these. Don't worry, it's a tiny little case study. It's very quick, but we'll use some practical examples from my time managing risk in the Isabel program. So we want to define a clear win. In the Isabel program, we tell people, hey, we're going to support survivors. And then we immediately say, what are we not going to do? And these slides are directly pulled. We say we're not going to hear all the details. We're not going to find the victims. We're not going to learn all the referrals. And we're not going to catch the perpetrators. And that immediately defines what we're doing and lowers our risk. And that's just because we're going to focus on taking care of Isabel. I'd love for you to set a risk example, be in charge of what the original risk level is, and then monitor it as you go. So go first and then go a little bit deeper than the ideal. I did that in this presentation by starting with a game where I told you everything, all these little faux pas that I've committed online, but I didn't ask you to tell me new ones that you had done, right? Or I didn't ask you to tell you things that other people did. So I went a little bit deeper than what I want the average to be. And in the Isabel program, the way I do that is I tell people, hey, your takeaway is you'll feel emotionally supported, prepared to emotionally support a survivor. My takeaway is that as a survivor, it feels really nice to know that more people know how to do this. So that's an example of me setting the risk example. When also in the Isabel program, I love to honor personality and create agency. So what we do is at the beginning of our train ride, and it's always a training, we actually have people pick a role to play on the train. If they would like to unmute themselves and speak, we're in a Zoom call for this. If they would like to answer questions out loud and be cold called, they're an announcer. If they would like to stick to the chat, we call the chat the baggage car. So we call people who hang out in the chat porters. And if you just want to hang out with our packet, we call it an engine packet, and that makes you an engineer. This makes us so introvert friendly because we want you to speak up if you want to, or be quiet if you don't want to. It also really helps. We've gotten feedback that it's really helpful for working moms who have 2 babies that they're taking care of and they feel bad that they can't engage. And no, they've told me, oh, okay, I'm an engineer. And they're not missing out on something, they're just filling a specific role. So that's how we honor personality. And it's important to continuously test and reset throughout the online experience. We do that in Isabel by asking the same question that I asked you. Who are your high-level truth people? And we ask them to promise to talk about some of the higher risk things that we learn rather than sharing their direct emotional responses to that. In our chat, we'll tell them to tell us who they're going to talk to about it later. And they can always talk about it later with me too. So that is how I navigate emotional risk in an online environment, which we are almost at our panel. To close out this little presentation, I'd love to remind you, why do we even do this? Why do we manage emotional risk? Well, because if you would like to have any like big, nice wins, you need to have small wins. There's a concept that goes across many different religions of you have to be faithful with small things to be faithful with big things. If you have found yourself wanting to create an equitable society where everyone has equal access to power and resources and everyone's voices are heard, well, you can't get to a really big thing like that. People aren't going to tell you if they are being like mistreated and harmed if they can't even just tell you about their day, most likely. So I'd love for you to see managing emotional risk in small ways as part of your path to equity. And why do we need to look at logistics? Your logistics communicate your intentions. That's best demonstrated by the time that I was invited to go to an event downtown. They said they really wanted me to go. They didn't tell me where to park in Austin at noon on a Tuesday. So it felt like they didn't really want me to be there. So the logistics communicate your intentions. And why use your brand? Your brand might be a risk mitigator. Pretending to be on a train has been a huge risk mitigator for me. So keep that in mind. We can talk about branding another time. So let's close with a full definition of emotional risk. It's any level of truth-telling which comes with a level of risk, requires a level of trust, and often includes an imbalance of power. And I think it's more complicated online. It is not necessarily always harder online. And that's one of the things we'll talk about with our panelists. So that's the end of this presentation. Now I'd love to see my panelists. I'm going to stop sharing and pop back over to my platform here. And let's see, can we have, okay, there's Natalie.
Hi.
Hi, Natalie. Hi, Janice.
Hi.
Okay, so I'm so excited to see you all again. And we are going to start with Janice. And I have my questions on paper because there's only so much tech that we can do in the world. So Junice, I would love to know, have you tell us a little bit about you, about yourself. What do you do in the Austin area and beyond?
Yeah, sure. I work as a neuropsychotherapist, so I practice clinical mental health from a brain-based perspective, teaching people how to retrain their brain to change their relational outcomes, their habits, and their patterns. And in my spare time, I do media commentary about clinical mental health and wellness and current events. And other than that, I'm just a human practicing yoga, probably hugging a tree somewhere in Austin.
I love it. I love it's good for us to sometimes remind ourselves that we're human and remind people that we're human.
I literally hugged an oak tree the other day. I'm that geek, really.
I love it. What was it? Was it lower your heart rate? Was it nice?
Yeah, it was great. I was like, I love you, tree. Like, one of the things that I do is spend time in nature. And in particular now, I just lean into more of that because there's nothing like fresh air and vitamin D and just, kind of being one with the ecosystem. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, J-Rock, what has it been like for you to navigate emotional risk as you do teletherapy appointments?
Yeah, it's been a journey because we've had such an uptick in the awareness and the demand for mental health care. So some of us have been working on some occasions almost sort of around the clock and a bit, depending on what's happening with our caseloads. We've also had to learn how to wear multiple hats. So whereas we went to grad school for one thing, now we're becoming like these troubleshooting tech experts, which is not necessarily the most fun thing when you really want to get into an engaging conversation via telehealth. And also a lot of therapists that you all may not know this, but a lot of us are sort of social introverts. And so we don't necessarily like seeing our face on the screen all day. so things like that, I think, vulnerability, just, like if a client is having sort of a breakthrough moment or a transitional moment and then the screen freezes, or the power on the device goes out, being able to kind of like reset our expectations of ourselves and let go of perfection paralysis in the story that we have to be perfect at something. Because I think one of the best ways to avoid burnout or even embarrassment is to just be authentic. And sometimes authenticity is a practice, especially in our culture.
I love that, to be authentic to avoid burnout. What have you been noticing about our society right now? Not everything about being online is suboptimal. So is there anything about being online that you felt has been a benefit?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, the ease of the fluidity in which we can connect and engage without necessarily having to do that daily commute. We can add more hours into our day. I think it pushes us to be more resilient and to add some creativity. And it also allows us to be more human when your dog runs by or your child or the AC repair, it's all kinds of things I've seen, and it's just like, and this is on national television sometimes. So I think that part has been kind of neat. And I think that, in terms of what's happening in our culture right now, I think that our nervous system has been a little overly activated. A lot of us has kind of been in that fight, flight, or freeze mode where that threat detection system goes off. And so I think it's important to just, look into learning some breath work and practicing breathing and grounding ourselves and having self-compassion and realizing that you can take your time, you can take breaks, you can actually write things down in a journal and put them on paper to prepare notes, and that you don't have to be omnipresent and omniscient. You don't have to be on call all the time, even though I know it sort of feels like that, but it's okay to step away. And I even suggest, I've been doing this for the last decade, to take a tech-free day, one day a week.
Ooh, that's good. Yeah. Especially now that we're all like extra techie.
Yeah. Just a minute. I think sometimes we can reconnect with who we are and reconnect with ourselves better by unplugging. So, I don't think any of this is to sort of demonize technology or any of that. I think emotions are energy in motion. And so it's about learning to direct them in the way in which you want them to go, and learning that when we start to feel a little tired or fatigued, when we can do a self-assessment, have self-compassion and say, okay, where am I being inauthentic? Where am I not setting boundaries for myself so that I can prevent burnout? And that if I do experience burnout, how are some ways that I reset?
I think that's really great advice. Thank you. And for those of you watching, if you have any questions that are specifically for Junice, then you are welcome to put them into the chat and we'll get to them at the end of our discussion. Autumn is showing that she's sharing she throws her dog Bettis on camera sometimes just to lower stress levels. That's great. All right, so Natalie's here. Natalie, will you tell us a little about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Anna. I'm the founder and director of an agency called Avion. We're a content agency that specializes in strategy and copywriting for clients in health, finance, and tech. I actually started the business in 2008 off the back of the recession because I couldn't get a job. And that was a big blessing in disguise. And here I am today. And that was in my home city in Melbourne. So you can probably tell I'm from Australia. And we've since expanded internationally.
Yeah, I met you online as you were launching your Austin community. And now you are in England. So that brings me to a question for you. How has it been for you to navigate emotional risk with all of these different time zones?
Yeah, so great question. Leading a team across multiple time zones has been really tough this year. To give people context, I run and manage the team in Melbourne. At the same time, we have one in the Philippines. I'm trying to build our offices in Austin and San Francisco. And at the same time, I'm actually working remote from London right now as we speak. So you can imagine that's quite a lot of time zones. And, I take responsibility for being available when my people need me. The worst part is waking up super early or staying up really late. And it sometimes kills me, but I have done it for, quite a while now. And I found 3 strategies that I find really help me. And those 3 strategies I kind of sum up as structure, showing up, and self-care. And I might just take a minute to explain those. What I find is that with structure, it's about figuring out what time works for you when you're most productive and sticking to it. So for example, I've tried starting my workday in the afternoon and then having meetings past midnight, kind of reliving my uni student days. And that just didn't work for me because, I'm more of a morning person. So I actually found that I find myself more productive working double shifts. So for example, I wake up before the sun comes up, I talk to my Australian team back to back for a few hours, and then I take a luxurious lunch break, which I might do some yoga, have something to eat, maybe do some chores, and then I log back online when America comes on. So, I've got the evening free once dinner is on the table that I probably made during my lunch break. I feel like I can chill out. And that makes me feel a bit more accomplished and gives me a sense of routine. The next one is showing up. So I think this is about understanding the energy, how your energy actually influences other people. And as a business leader, there's already this sense of distance between you and your teammates when you're on the other side of the world, and that can jeopardize your authority. So you want to be able to be really present in meetings, but that can be really hard. I've had a really stressful year this year with all sorts of travel complications, and I even had to cancel my wedding in Australia this year. So, while my team were really wonderful and they stepped up and they put in extra work, ironically, they also started to withdraw from me because they wanted to give me space and they didn't know if I was okay. So, it actually made us, there was this disconnect that I didn't expect to happen. And I even had one of my peers say to me, "Oh, I didn't give you that new project because I thought you were too stressed." And they were trying to be nice. But when you're running a business in COVID, you don't want to hear that. You need all the business you can get. So, and that brings me to my next point, which is self-care. Because self-care is almost impossible when you're waking up for 5 a.m. meetings every day. So, I think knowing what works for you, going back to the first thing, for example, for me, how do I give myself energy? And that's about fitting 5 days of work into 4. So I always feel like I have a long weekend. I also have a buddy system at work. So my teammates can actually lean on each other without me. So it's like a Russian roulette kind of game every week that changes between them. And I've just implemented a counseling program for everyone, so they can actually professionally and personally work through some of their own challenges with a professional, and that way they feel more empowered to kind of take their own initiative. So I find that works really well for me.
I think that is really helpful, and I love a three-part strategy. I was raised by a Baptist minister, so a list of three always gets me. Natalie, I know that you have a really great answer to the question about positive aspects of being online. I want to come back to that after we go visit Andrew for a couple of minutes, okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right, Andrew, hi, will you tell us about yourself?
Hi, Anna. Sure. So I've spent 23 years now working in technology at 7 different Fortune 500 companies, including places like eBay and Expedia. Currently, I'm the founder and principal of a company called BravePath. We provide technical recruiting, but also product management, consulting, and coaching services.
That's great. And what has it been like for you to navigate emotional risk in a recruitment atmosphere where you're meeting people for the first time?
Yeah, first of all, in COVID, with everything shifting toward Zoom, I know for most people that's a shift from in-person to online. For us, it's partially been a shift from the phone to video, which is actually an improvement, right? And so there are more candidates. Traditionally, a candidate is at work when we need to call them. That's a confidential conversation, so they're looking for a place to have a confidential phone call. Now they're at home, we can have a video call. So that's actually an improvement for us. But the challenge for us always is I may be meeting someone for the first time, and I have to very quickly get to a place where I'm uncovering details to see if a client and a candidate are a match. And so, as you know, most people, almost everyone, when they're being interviewed, they're trying to be their best selves. And often that means perfection to most people. And so they're trying to hide the flaws. Sometimes they're trying to be someone else. And so how can I cut through that, not just to help the client, but to help the candidate, right? Because I want to find something that you're really going to enjoy. And so putting them at ease as quickly as possible. It's not like I'm going to have 7 sessions with them. It may only be 1. So how do I quickly sort of break the ice? Sometimes, I usually like to start with, how can I break the ice with something completely unrelated? So you may see, I intentionally have Star Wars characters behind me. I've got a quote behind me. Janice has a quote behind her. Natalie, not as much. I may actually ask you what type of plant that is behind you. And Anna, maybe the best of all, the unfinished puzzle. That's just an awesome conversation piece. So
that's a whole story.
Yeah, that's right. Relating to people right off the bat, putting them at ease, maybe finding something we have in common. So I actually favor, all 4 of us right now have real backgrounds. I know some people don't have a choice, but a real background in a Zoom meeting that's thoughtful and maybe provides an opportunity to connect with other people right off the bat, I think that's a great idea. Sometimes what I need to do is be vulnerable myself to bring out a deeper conversation with a client or candidate. Maybe an example of that right now, we're seeing a lot of people who have been unemployed since COVID began. That wears on your self-confidence after a while. Maybe in the job interview, you're putting on the best smile you can, but your confidence is taking a hit. Instead of me just saying, wow, you look like you lack confidence, what I can do is say things like, I think a technique like informational interviewing is not only going to help you find a job, but I'll advise to people that it's going to help you build your confidence too, because you're going to realize how freaking smart you are as you're meeting with people and telling them about your experience. And so I just volunteer to them that could help your self-confidence as well, instead of starting with a criticism. So if I can convince them that I'm acting in their best interests, then I can give them feedback. And many times people are grateful for that, because a lot of recruiters don't do that. A lot of recruiters will just say, nope, you're not the right person for the job. And so forming a deeper connection with both our clients and candidates as quickly as possible is the big challenge for us.
I love that. And I have a background in elementary education, and what you're describing reminds me of positive psychology, where you pivot around the good or positive reinforcement, where you pivot around what's working to get to what isn't. You mentioned one thing, and I'd love to know if you have some more. What has been good for you, or what has been a positive aspect of being online?
Yeah, so the other one that we were chatting about in preparation, hopefully it's not very obvious here. I'm very a physically large human, and in person, there's not much I can do about the fact that I'm 6'5", and when maybe I meet somebody who's 5'1", there's just an immediate discomfort for both of us. And online, it's a little harder to tell. I still have the scary beard and the deep voice, but I like the fact that we're all at eye level right now. And I know everybody wishes they were tall, right? There's some downsides to being tall. And I like the fact that it's kind of equalizes the playing field a little bit more. And hopefully I'm a little bit more approachable as somebody who could be self-conscious about, I don't want to physically intimidate people. So for me, I think that's helped me in interacting on video instead of in person.
That's fascinating. Thank you. We're going to pivot back to Natalie, and we have about 4 minutes left. So while Natalie's answering, if you have questions for our panel, please go ahead and put them in the chat, and then the moderators will put them into our private chat as well so we see them. So Natalie, what has been a benefit from switching to more online things?
Yeah, thanks, Anna. And definitely to Andrew's point, I think giving people the ability to feel like they are on that even playing field definitely works in a employee-employer relationship as well. In regards to making safe spaces for people, so as content experts, part of the work that we do at Avion is writing chatbot scripts. And what's really interesting about this work is that people are more likely to be honest or open about things like their income or their opinions when they're talking to a robot, because they don't feel a sense of judgment on the other end. And so what we can learn from this at the workplace is asking ourselves, okay, well, people are willing to open up as long as they feel like they're anonymous. So what, I often encourage other business owners, what other systems can they put in to their workplace to set up anonymous feedback loops? For example, we use an online software platform called Office Vibe. It's just surveys that get sent out to your team each week, and they can reply, and it's free and really easy to use. But of course, you can get more sophisticated programs too, like Culture Amp.
I love that. Thank you so much. I don't think about bots very often, so that was an eye-opening moment for me. We've got some questions coming in, and I'm going to suggest that J-Rock answer this one. We've got, how can management or leadership help make their employees comfortable and willing to speak about tough topics? So how do we transition up to some higher risk things, J-Rock?
Yeah, I think that I know even with my own staff and team, at the beginning of our team meetings, we'll do a check-in and we'll talk about something that's therapeutically beneficial, such as self-care strategies. We may talk about common mental health, just stressors right now, so that people feel kind of comfortable talking a bit about trauma or even vicarious trauma from taking in too much media, that kind of thing. We'll do vagal breathing exercises where we put our hand over our vagal nerve and do some breath work right there in the team meeting. And so basically it creates a safe space by basically presenting an invitation of sorts to say that this is something that we talk about here, that it's safe to talk about it here, and that we're going to honor that space. And then if you need more resources after, you can, speak with me one-on-one directly. But it's kind of giving permission, like letting that be a part of the culture, that it doesn't have to be something that's stigmatized or shameful.
Thank you, J-Rock. And next question is going to be for Andrew. Is there anything that individuals rarely think about when navigating emotional risk? What do you think, Andrew?
I think sometimes, especially as leaders, we require ourselves to appear super confident and bulletproof a lot of the time. And I think what might be counterintuitive for some folks, if you haven't read Brené Brown, do yourself a favor and do that. But the power of vulnerability. And so being vulnerable yourself first is often the best way to get someone else to open up and be willing to trust you and share something that they need to talk about, but maybe don't feel comfortable if you're putting up that shield of perfection and confidence.
Thanks so much, Andrew. We're getting to the end of our session. I'd love for you all to take a screenshot of these names. Go find them on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on Medium. These are exceptional writers and speakers. And if you need speakers for your event, please reach out to them. If you can't find their emails for some reason, my email is anna@annawestbrook.com. I will get you in touch with them. So I guess we're coming right to the end, and we'll say goodbye and wait to be taken out into the ether. I'm not sure how this. There we go. There's tons.
Just to like share with you guys, I brought my unicorn. I know that you
Yes.
guys were talking about Star Wars and everything. Here's my amazing unicorn. I actually travel with them because before COVID, I was a road warrior, and I needed something that would help me, remind me to like go back home. And actually, this is my dog's favorite plush toy, so that's why I carry it all the time. So like when I get home, he just grabs it and he just tries to kill it. I wanted to say, J-Rock, I also love to hug trees, so I'm gonna try to look for an oak tree. You know, Natalie, Australia in the house. There we go. And Star Wars figurines. I love Star Wars. I have to say, I'm the episode 1 type of guy that's my favorite episode for Star Wars. So I have to say that to you, Andrew. I'm pretty sure you're like episode 1. Tony, what are you thinking?
Empire Strikes Back for me, but it's all good.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Anna. Thank you so much, everyone.